Do you like mysteries? To wander through the enigmatic mist of the inexplicable? Great. I'm Merc, and here you'll find what you're looking for. Welcome to my domains. The truth dissolves into the mist.
You have already imagined looking at the person you love most and no longer recognizing anything in their gaze. The voice is still the same, the face is still the same, but there is something deeply wrong, something moving beneath the skin. Welcome to the darkest side of Japanese folklore, a side that pop culture insists on hiding behind fluffy tails and shiny eyes. Key, because the real Kitsune is not your friend, not a wise guardian, and certainly not a cute little spirit animal. The real Kitsune is a predator of souls, a conscious parasite that chooses its victims with a precision that will freeze your blood. And it has already been inside real people, real women, treated by real doctors in 20th century Japan. Are you ready to discover what the anime does not show? Then sit down, turn off the lights, and prepare to meet the fox that possesses humans. You have heard of the nine-tailed Kitsune. Of course you have. It is everywhere. In games, in series, in colorful illustrations. But ancient Japan did not see the Kitsune as a mascot. It saw the Kitsune as a high-class yokai, a being as powerful as it was dangerous. And the most dangerous of all its powers was not illusion, not spiritual fire, not transformation into a tree or a shadow. The most terrifying power of the Kitsune was the complete and irreversible possession of the mind and body of a human being. And it did not possess just anyone. It preferably possessed young women, girls of childbearing age, alone, vulnerable, or simply distracted. The phenomenon had a name, Kitsunetsuki, which literally means the state of being possessed by a fox. And this state transformed the victim into something that was no longer human, but also not completely animal. Imagine it yourself, waking up one day and feeling that your desires are no longer yours. You open the refrigerator and the food you once loved now seems repulsive, while things you never liked suddenly smell like the only thing that can satisfy you. The possessed by the Kitsune developed strange appetites, and not strange in a figurative sense, strange in a literal, non-human sense. They started eating only what foxes like, raw tofu, rotten fish, small raw rodents when they had access to them, insects. Family members reported that the victim seemed disgusted by cooked rice, hot soups, any food prepared by human fire. And that was just the beginning. The second sign was even more disturbing. The victim began to speak languages she had never learned. Not neighboring dialects, not isolated words, but complete sentences in languages she had never studied or even heard. There are records of illiterate peasant women speaking classical Chinese, of merchants' daughters reciting sutras in Sanskrit, of young women who had never left their village answering questions in dialects from distant provinces. Japanese exorcists called this the fox tongue, and they believed it was not the victim speaking, but rather the entity inside her using her vocal cords like a puppet. And then came the most physical sign, the most visceral, the hardest to ignore. Movable swellings beneath the skin. Look at the arm of the possessed person and see a protrusion, like a quail egg, sliding just below the surface of the skin. You touch it, and the protrusion moves. You press it, and it slips to another place, as if something alive were circulating inside the victim's flesh. The ancients said it was the fox itself, shrunk, curled up, traveling through its host's body like a liquid parasite. And when you tried to pierce that swelling with a needle, which many did during exorcisms, the protrusion simply shifted to another part of the body, avoiding the metal tip as if it had its own intelligence. Think about that for a moment. Are in a room with a person you have known for years, and suddenly a thing starts moving beneath her skin, and she feels nothing, does not react, just looks at you with eyes that seem to belong to another being. What would you do? Japan's pre-modern answer was simple: exorcism. And these were not peaceful exorcisms with incense and soft prayers. They were violent, aggressive rituals that often bordered on torture. The practitioners, called Kitsunetsuki, or fox owners, were people who supposedly had control over these entities. But when the possession happened without control, you had to call a Yamabushi, an ascetic mountain monk. The Yamabushi arrived with a scroll, a bell, and a set of long, thin needles. The goal was simple: find the moving swelling and immobilize it before it could escape. But the fox was clever. It hid in armpits, behind knees, inside the abdominal cavity. Records tell of experienced exorcists spending hours poking and pressing the victim's body while she yelped like an animal and tried to bite whoever came near. Yes, because another classic symptom of possession was canine aggression. The victim would snarl, bare their teeth, and attack without warning, exactly like a cornered fox. Can you imagine your own mother or sister acting like that, snarling at you, trying to bite you, with eyes that glow in the dark? And do not think this is just medieval legend, because the most terrifying part of this story is that cases of Kitsunetsuki were documented by real doctors in the 19th century and even into the early 20th century. Yes, doctors trained in Western universities, with stethoscopes and thermometers, were called to attend to women showing all these symptoms, and they could not explain what they saw. A famous case occurred in Shimane Prefecture in 1892. An 18-year-old girl named began refusing food, speaking phrases in Korean she had never learned, and developing movable swellings on her arms and legs. The village doctor, trained in Tokyo, examined her for 3 days. He recorded in his diary that the swellings indeed moved when touched, that the skin temperature changed locally, and that the girl's pupil dilated and contracted without light stimulation. He wrote, quote, "I find no fever, I find no tumor, I find no paralysis. However, the flesh moves as if there were a living animal inside it." End quote. The doctor suggested a sedative, but the family called an exorcist. The exorcist spent 4 hours with and at the end of the 5th hour, after applying needles to 9 different points on the body, he announced that the fox had left through the girl's mouth, visible only to him. Of course, woke up the next day remembering nothing, asking for rice and hot tea as if nothing had happened. The doctor returned, examined her again, and recorded that all symptoms had disappeared. He never published a paper on the case, but kept the diary hidden until his death in 1938. Cases like this are more common than you think, and they raise a disturbing question. If doctors could not explain, and exorcists seemed to resolve, what exactly was happening? Modern science calls this a culture-bound syndrome, a psychiatric disorder induced by collective belief. In other words, the person believes so strongly that they can be possessed by a fox that their own brain creates the physical symptoms, including the moving swellings. Studies show that hypnotic suggestion can produce local changes in blood circulation, creating actual lumps that shift with finger pressure. And speaking unknown languages also has a name, xenoglossia, and it is a very rare phenomenon that some psychologists associate with subliminal memories or pronunciation slips that the listener interprets as a foreign language. But here is the problem with that explanation. Real xenoglossia, the kind studied by universities, usually involves isolated words or short phrases. In cases of Kitsunetsuki, the victims often held entire conversations in languages that no longer existed, such as classical Chinese or Innu, the dead language of Japan's indigenous peoples. And there was no way an illiterate 19th century peasant woman could have had contact with those languages, not even subliminally. Which brings us back to the starting point. Perhaps not everything needs to be explained. Perhaps some doors, when opened, show things that the rational mind cannot process. And pop culture, by transforming the kitsune into a symbol of wisdom and beauty, did something very clever. It packaged terror into a digestible box. Because it is easier to sell nine-tailed fox plushies than to admit that your daughter might wake up tomorrow, speaking a dead language with bubbles moving under her skin. But folklore does not lie. Folklore warns. Every story of Kitsunetsuki that survived to this day is a warning wrapped in superstition, a warning that there are encounters that change the very structure of what you are. And the scariest thing of all is that the kitsune does not need permission to enter. Sir, unlike Western demons that require invitations or pacts, the Japanese fox simply enters, like a cold wind through a crack you did not even know existed. The ancients said it chose its victims by their emotional fragility, by moments of great sadness or loneliness. It waited for the breach and then settled in, not as a scream, but as a whisper, changing tastes one by one, replacing the native tongue with another, reorganizing the flesh from within. Today, in rural Japan, there are still temples that perform protection rituals against Kitsunetsuki. They no longer call it exorcism. Of course, that would be politically incorrect. They call it a spiritual purification ceremony. But the bell is the same, the needles are the same, and the screams of the victims, the screams are exactly the same as those in 18th century records. Q can choose to believe this is just madness, just suggestion, just the human mind tripping over its own fears. But before you close this video, ask yourself one question. If you saw a swelling moving beneath the skin of someone you love, and that person started speaking in a language no living human knows, what exactly would you do? Would you call a doctor? Or would you call someone with needles and a bell? Perhaps the answer lies less in science and more in the fact that for hundreds of years, in thousands of Japanese villages, the only thing that worked was driving the fox out. And if the fox returns tomorrow, and if it chooses you, or someone next to you, how will you know the difference between a nightmare and reality? You will not know, until the flesh begins to move.
Did you like this mystery? And what is your theory? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, then like and share. I'm Merc, and I'll be waiting for you in the next mystery.